Jeff at Bikes and Bites, and I've got a few things lined up for you today. I hope you enjoy them, so thanks for joining me. First thing, tips for riding. Just around the corner is spring. It's February here when I'm recording, and about a month and a half, there's a good possibility that we'll be wanting to ride on trails. And what about the kids in your home? Are there any kids in your house who might want to learn to ride this year? You know, they've been cooped up all winter. There's a great possibility they could. So, the question of kids riding. What was it like for you when you were learning? Did you learn on your own? Was there an adult there to help you, or several? What was the experience like? A lot of times kids can feel pressured by the adults because, hey, the adults can ride, so why don't the kids catch on? But we forget what it was like when we first learned. I don't know about you, but it took me several tries. I know a few kids who got it right on the first time. Unbelievable, but most people learn several times. Lots of experience. Here's a few tips to pass on. When training a child, the type of bike is important. You know, they have these new bikes out called Strider bikes. Trek Bikes has one called the Kickster. It's a bicycle without pedals. And what happens is that the kids learn to balance the bike and keep their feet on the ground or close to the ground. It's a very effective way of learning balance, and the pedals don't get in the way. However, let's say you don't have it in your budget to buy a separate Strider bike. You could take the pedals off and help your kid to learn balance with the pedals off. That's possible. You want to put the seat real low so the child can touch the ground with their feet and push off. There's lots of stuff on the web that can help you with that, but a few ideas are kind of things to avoid. Avoid running along beside the child holding them up. They'll be relying on you and it might not work out so great. Also, when training a child, a great tip is learn on a field, a level field. Asphalt can be rather scratchy. Another idea is it should be fun. Learning to ride a bike shouldn't be pressured and a lot of get it done kind of thing. It should be fun. So setting the stage in your mind and in the child's mind about this being an enjoyable experience is the way to go. So those are a few of my tips. If you're interested in getting a Strider bike or a kid's bike, I can line one up for you through Trek Bikes. So give me a call. Now on to our story. Well, here we are back again. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you're seeing here on this video channel, please don't be afraid to give you a like or subscribe, and we'll carry on with you. I introduced you last time to Reid and about his new bike. I'd like to carry on from there. Now, Reid was a fascinating fellow. He loved to ride, and it was part of their culture on the street in those days. Get out on your bike and ride. Oh, but before he did that, he thought maybe I should check out what this bike is all about. Of course, he'd already learned about the brake. It was a back pedal brake, not hand grip brakes, not levers, but actually a back pedal brake. So that was fascinating that he saw that because his brother's bike was different. The other things he wanted to investigate were the tires. Of course, they were rubber and they had grips on them that were really interesting. He wondered how those were made. He also looked at the wheels and the spokes, which are fascinating because you could actually sort of pluck them and they'd make a sound. Interesting to him. Of course, then also there was the seat, there was the frame, the pedals, and what's called the crank, and the chain that would really get your fingers all mucky if you grabbed it, which he experienced and his mom told him about. You don't grab that unless you got a cloth. Anyway, so he's learning about the bike and all the things that it did, and on the back and the front there were gears, and that was fascinating as well. How did that all mesh together, and how did the measurements work? How did it work for them to actually make all those little gears and those teeth go into the chain at the same time? This was beyond him, but rather fascinating. Something I'm sure he'd figure out later on in life. So, after he figured out how the bike worked, the next thing is how far to go on it. And so he tested himself. The first challenge was to get to the end of the block. End of the block, that was an adventure. It was amazing how large it seemed initially, how big it looked to actually go that distance. But then once he'd done it, it wasn't all that big at all. And then his sights got farther. He thought, I wonder if I can make it around the block. Making it around the block, he thought maybe he'd have to take a lunch or get some backup to get all the way. But sure enough, little by little, he made it all the way around the block. He made it a quarter of the way, came back home. Half the way, came back home. Then his brother said, if you made it halfway around the block, you could make it all the way around the block. He scratched his head about that and thought, oh, yeah, if you go halfway and then you come back the rest of the half, that's the whole way. And so he said, what the heck? I'll go all the way around the block. So the next day he did. It was quite an adventure because he saw things he hadn't seen before. Of course, he'd gone in the family car and gone for trips and driven around the block to get, out around the community, but he'd never gone on a bike. And the things that he saw were beyond what he'd seen before. So there was a park on the right-hand side. There were some trees, some really large trees and small trees, which he wondered what kind they were. And the curbs and the paving and the sidewalks were all different. You had to watch out for the curbs. It was interesting. He felt that when he got back home that he'd actually done a major accomplishment. There's something, it was sort of like a notch on the belt or the measurement on the wall to see how tall you were. It was an accomplishment. He was pretty proud of himself for a while, and his mom heard about it. He told her, he was bragging about that he'd gotten all the way around the block, and she said, then that means I think I might have an errand for you to do. An errand, he said? To go somewhere? On my bike? Yeah, she said, we need a loaf of bread. We're out of bread, and you know where the bakery is, don't you? Oh yeah, we've gone there in the car. She said, right. So she mapped out the route for him, where he would go. It would be half of the route, and then across a busy street, and then there he was at the bakery. Oh, he was so excited. He thought, this is even more. This is more than I imagined. And so he got on his bike, and his mom gave him a $5 bill. That was a lot of money. She said a loaf of bread would cost $1, and that he should come back with $4 left. That's all she had. So he put it in his pocket, and she gave him a little note of the kind of bread that he should buy, and he took off. He went halfway around the block and then crossed the busy street. We watched both ways, because there was cars then, and there weren't any crosswalks. You had to watch out for the cars. Not like nowadays where the cars look out for you. You as the rider had to watch out for the cars. So he watched for the cars, make sure there was none coming. He ran across the road, holding his bike, and he got to the other side. There, behold, before him was the bakery, the Bon Ton Bakery. He'd been in there before with his mom, But he wasn't really responsible to see what was on the shelves. His mom did all that, so he was just sort of along for the ride. But now it was his turn, and he had to observe what was on those shelves. He found the loaf of bread, gave the lady the note behind the counter, said, "This is what my mom wants me to buy." And she got the loaf of bread, put it before him, and then he saw before him on the shelves down below the counter, amazing creations. One of them was all, sprinkled in sugar, and the other one had red drops on it, and the other one was all chocolate and sort of tan on the bottom and chocolate on the top. And as he looked at it, his mouth started to water. He hadn't really tasted one of those before, but he imagined how it must taste. And so he looked up at the lady and said, "Well, how much is that?" And she said, "Well, that's another $1." He said in his mind, "How much is that? Would I have enough money?" And she said, "Oh yes, you'd have change back. You'd have $3 back." And he thought in his mind, he thought he could do it. But then he heard a voice, his mom, saying, "Bring back the $4. Oh, this was a conflict. He didn't have his mom right there to ask her, so he thought, I'll buy it anyway. She's not here. So he bought the donut. He wondered why they called it a donut. The lady said it was sort of like, it looked like a nut on a bolt. It had a hole in the middle and the nut on the outside. A donut. I guess that made sense to him. So he got the bread into a bag and he got the donut in his hand. He realized he'd have to work this out. So he sat down on the curb outside the bakery, put the loaf of bread on his right side and the donut on his right side, and he ate the chocolate donut. Of course, there was no mirror, but he had chocolate all over his face. It was on his hands. He licked it off of his hands, and there were crumbs down his front, and he was in a different world. Just imagine what a bicycle can really do for you. Take you to a new land of adventure. So, feeling very satisfied and quite full, he made his way back home. Crossed a busy street, watching out for the traffic, went around the block, back the halfway, got to the door and realized something he'd have to face, which was reality. The donut had been his momentary thought, but when he faced his mom, he realized this was a reality he had to face. What would he do? He could lie. He could say, "I dropped one of the dollars, and so I only have 3 left." That might have gone over. But inside, he started to have this conflict inside, saying, what should I do? Tell her the truth? I ate a donut? Well, it was evident to his mom that something had happened because the chocolate was still on his face. And she said, "Did you buy a donut?" He said, "How did you know?" She said, "Well, it's all over your face." Oh, he said, "I guess there's no way I could get away with lying to himself. I ate a donut. I bought it with some of the money." She said, "I told you to bring $4 back." "I'm sorry, Mom, I really am." Well, she said, "Let it be a lesson to you that if I give you an instruction, you do what I ask you." Okay, Mom, he said, I'll do what I ask. Next time when I go to the bakery, can I buy a donut?" Oh, he was quick, wasn't he? Anyway, he survived that experience. Maybe you've experienced that as well. So he learned more about his bike. He learned about further adventures he could have. And that's my story for now. Thanks for listening.